Why do the Japanese eat soba on New Year's Eve? Amid the frenzy of New Year's celebrations, while many of us toast with champagne or eat black-eyed peas to attract prosperity, there exists an ancient tradition in Japan that invites reflection, hope, and a delicious steaming bowl of noodles. It's not just a meal, it's a rite of passage, a dive into centuries of history and symbolism. We're talking about Toshikoshi Soba, the year-crossing soba. But what makes this dish so special? Why, year after year, do millions of Japanese people choose soba as the last flavor to touch their lips before midnight? Today, on Asian Food Stories, we're going to unravel the mysteries behind this tradition. Get ready for a journey that transcends taste, exploring spirituality, the quest for longevity, and the rituals that make Toshikoshi Soba much more than just noodles. To understand Toshikoshi Soba, we first need to know about soba itself. Contrary to what many think, soba isn't made from wheat, but from buckwheat, a nutrient-rich seed with unique properties. Its history in Japan is as long and intertwined as its own strands. Buckwheat was brought to the Japanese archipelago from China in ancient times, possibly as early as the 8th century, when trade and cultural routes between the two countries were expanding. However, back then, buckwheat was consumed in very different forms from what we know today. Initially, the Japanese prepared buckwheat as thick porridges, known as sobagaki, or transformed it into rustic pancakes and dumplings. These preparations were subsistence foods, appreciated for their ability to satisfy hunger and provide energy during times of scarcity. Buckwheat had a crucial advantage. It was an extremely hardy plant, capable of growing in poor soils and adverse climate conditions where rice simply wouldn't thrive. This natural resilience of the plant already carried powerful symbolism that would later be transferred to the noodle dish itself. But it was during the Edo period, which extended from the early 17th century to the mid-19th century, that soba as we know it today, in the form of long, delicate noodles, truly flourished and won the hearts of the Japanese. This was a period of relative peace and stability in Japan. After centuries of feudal wars, cities grew exponentially, especially Edo, which would become Tokyo, transforming into one of the world's largest metropolises at the time. With rapid urbanization came the need for quick, nutritious, and affordable food for the thousands of workers, merchants, artisans, and artists who populated the busy streets of the capital. It was in this vibrant and dynamic context that soba in noodle form became popular. From a simple, rustic food of peasants and rural workers, it transformed into a sophisticated urban dish, appreciated by all social classes. Merchants loved it for its quick preparation. While other dishes took hours, soba was ready in minutes. The era's artists and intellectuals also appreciated it, not only for its unique flavor and pleasant texture, but also because it was considered a clean and nutritious food that didn't weigh heavily on the stomach and allowed them to continue their creative activities without the lethargy that often accompanies heavy meals. Soba stalls, known as soba-ya, began appearing on every corner of Edo. It's estimated that, at the height of the Edo period, there were about 3,700 establishments selling soba in Edo alone, an impressive number for a city that was smaller than today's 23 Tokyo districts. These stalls operated day and night, serving workers who left before dawn and those who returned late at night. Soba truly became Japan's original fast food, centuries before the concept of fast food spread throughout the Western world. There are countless types of soba, each with its unique characteristics and preparation methods, demonstrating Japanese culinary versatility and creativity. Soba can be prepared hot or cold, depending on the season and personal preference, and can be accompanied by an infinity of aromatic broths and complementary ingredients. We have zaru soba, perhaps the purest and most refined way to enjoy the noodles. served cold on a bamboo sieve with a dipping sauce made from dashi, shoyu, and mirin. There's also kitsune soba, adorned with slices of abura age, sweetened fried tofu, that deliciously absorbs the broth. Tempura soba features crispy fried shrimp or vegetables floating over the steaming broth. And we can't forget tanuki soba, topped with crunchy tempura bits, or tsukimi soba, where a raw egg is carefully placed in the center of the bowl, resembling the full moon reflected in water. But among all these delicious and creative variations, none carries the cultural weight, symbolic depth, and spiritual charge of toshikoshi soba. This isn't just another dish in the vast repertoire of soba cuisine. It's a tangible manifestation of hopes, wishes, and humanity's eternal quest for renewal and transcendence. It's a dish that exists in a liminal space, between the sacred and the everyday, between ritual and meal, between a year that ends and another that begins with its infinite possibilities. Now that we know the historical and cultural foundation, let's get to the heart of the mystery. Why specifically soba, and why exactly at the turn of the year? The symbolism behind toshikoshi soba is as rich, complex, and multifaceted as the umami broth that accompanies it. There isn't just one meaning, but layers upon layers of interpretations that have accumulated over centuries of tradition. The first, and perhaps most immediately recognizable meaning, lies in the physical nature of the noodle itself. Soba strands are remarkably long and thin. This characteristic isn't accidental, but intentional, carrying deep symbolism. The long strands represent longevity and health, a universal wish for a long, prosperous life full of meaning. By eating these long strands, the Japanese express their desire for their own lives to be equally long and extended, to experience many years of happiness, growth, and fulfillment. It's a kind of sympathetic magic, where the act of consuming something long and continuous symbolizes, and, in a way, invokes an equally long and continuous life. But there's something even more subtle and deeply philosophical in this symbolism. Soba, despite its long strands, is remarkably delicate and fragile. By its very nature, buckwheat noodles are easily cut or broken when bitten, especially when compared to other more elastic and resistant types of noodles, like udon or ramen. This apparent fragility, which could be seen as a disadvantage in other contexts, transforms here into an extremely powerful metaphor loaded with spiritual meaning. The ease with which soba breaks represents the ability to cut and free oneself from the difficulties, sorrows, regrets, and misfortunes that we inevitably accumulate during the year that's ending. Each year brings not only joys and achievements, but also challenges, losses, mistakes, and painful experiences. Toshikoshi soba offers a ritual opportunity to symbolically cut these negative ties, to shed the emotional and psychological weight we carry, allowing us to start the new year with a clean slate, a light heart, and a renewed mind. This act of cutting isn't violent or aggressive, but gentle and deliberate. It's a recognition that, although we can't change the past, we can choose not to let it define or imprison us. By gently biting the soba strands and feeling them break easily, the Japanese perform a ritual of liberation, an act of letting go that is simultaneously simple and profound. It's a practice of mindfulness, disguised as a meal, a moment of active meditation on the impermanence of all things and our capacity for continuous renewal. Additionally, the flexibility of soba strands, their ability to adapt to different broths, temperatures, and preparations, also carries important symbolism. It represents the resilience and flexibility we need to cultivate to face the inevitable challenges the new year will bring. Just as soba harmoniously adapts to different culinary contexts, we too must be able to adapt to life's changes and varying circumstances, maintaining our essence while adjusting to our surroundings. There's also a particularly intriguing and practical belief associated with goldsmiths and artisans who worked with precious metals, especially during the Edo period. These skilled professionals used soba dough, not cooked noodles, but the raw, sticky dough made from buckwheat flour, as an ingenious tool in their meticulous work. They spread this dough over their workbenches at the end of the day, and the sticky substance collected and aggregated the tiny particles of gold and silver that had dispersed and been lost during the jewelry and precious object manufacturing process. This ingenious practice didn't go unnoticed by the general population. The association between soba and the ability to gather or collect gold became part of popular imagination. Therefore, eating soba on New Year's acquired an additional meaning. It became a wish for good financial fortune and material wealth for the coming year. It was as if, by consuming soba, people were symbolically gathering good moments, prosperity opportunities, and the wealth of the next year, just as soba literally gathered precious metals in goldsmiths' workshops. This economic symbolism perfectly complemented the spiritual and philosophical meanings, creating a tradition that addressed both the material and spiritual needs of human beings. Toshikoshi soba doesn't exist in a cultural vacuum. It's an integral and inseparable part of Shogatsu celebrations, the Japanese New Year, which are undoubtedly the most important and significant festivities in the country's calendar. Shogatsu isn't simply a date on the calendar, but a sacred period of renewal, purification, and reconnection with family, ancestors, and the fundamental values of Japanese culture. And as in any great religious or cultural celebration, meticulously preserved rituals are the true soul of tradition, giving it structure, meaning, and continuity through generations. On New Year's Eve, known as Omisoka, the atmosphere throughout Japan undergoes a palpable transformation. The busy streets of major cities gradually fall silent as families retreat to their homes. Stores close their doors, trains reduce their frequencies, and an almost solemn reverence takes hold of the country. It's a moment of collective anticipation, where an entire nation simultaneously prepares for the rite of passage that marks the end of one cycle and the beginning of another. It's a time of reflection, of looking back with gratitude and forward with hope. One of the most powerful and spiritually significant rituals of this night is Joya no Kane, the majestic ringing of Buddhist temple bells, exactly 108 times. These aren't small or delicate bells, but enormous bronze structures that can weigh several tons, like the famous bell at Chianen Temple in Kyoto, which weighs an impressive 70 tons and requires a team of 17 monks working in perfect coordination to ring it properly. The deep, resonant sound of these giant bells echoes through cities and villages, penetrating homes, hearts, and minds, creating a moment of national spiritual unity. Each of the 108 tolls represents the purification of one of the 108 worldly desires and earthly passions, known in Japanese as Bono, which according to Buddhism afflict us and imprison us in the cycle of suffering. These 108 Bono derive from complex Buddhist spiritual mathematics. There are 6 fundamental senses: sight, hearing, smell, taste, touch, and mind, each of which can experience pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral sensations, creating 18 variations. These 18 variations are divided into pure and impure, resulting in 36. Finally, these 36 are multiplied by 3 to represent past, present, and future, totaling exactly 108. Each ring of the bell symbolically purifies one of these desires or attachments, cleansing the soul and preparing it for a new beginning. Most temples follow a specific tradition in the timing of these rings. 107 tolls are given while the year is ending, symbolically cleansing the desires accumulated during those 12 months. The 108th and final toll resonates precisely at midnight, or just after, marking not only the entry into the new year, but also the final moment of purification, as if that last sound carried with it all the impurities of the past and opened space for a clean and renewed future. And it's precisely in this intense climate of spiritual purification and renewal that Toshikoshi Soba enters the scene in an absolutely crucial way. The timing is fundamental and loaded with meaning. It's essential, according to tradition, that the noodles be eaten before midnight on December 31st. This isn't an arbitrary or superstitious rule, but a deliberate choice based on deep symbolism. There are several interconnected reasons for this temporal specificity. First, and most important, soba must be consumed before midnight so we can symbolically cut and leave behind, definitively and completely, all the difficulties, worries, and negative energies of the ending year. Taking soba into the new year would be counterproductive and even dangerous from a symbolic point of view. It would be like deliberately carrying the burdens, problems, and stagnant energies of the past into a future that should begin clean and full of possibilities. There's even a popular superstition that eating toshikoshi soba after midnight can bring bad luck or financial difficulties in the following year. This belief, although perhaps not taken completely seriously by everyone, reinforces the importance of correct timing. Second, toshikoshi soba serves as a delicious, nutritious, and symbolically charged bridge between the years. It's an intentionally light, easily digestible meal that prepares the body and spirit for the prolonged celebrations and hearty traditional meals that will come in the first days of January. After eating toshikoshi soba, many families gather to await midnight, listening to the distant ringing of bells, reflecting on the past year, and sharing hopes for the future. Some visit temples and shrines for Hatsumode, the first religious visit of the year, which can attract millions of people to the most popular locations. The simplicity of toshikoshi soba intentionally contrasts with the elaboration of osechi ryori, the traditional New Year's cuisine that will be consumed in the following days. Osechi is composed of dozens of different dishes, each meticulously prepared and loaded with its own symbolism, served in elegant, multi-tiered lacquered boxes called jubako. There are dishes representing fertility, longevity, academic success, financial prosperity, and many other desirable aspects of life. Compared to this elaborate abundance, toshikoshi soba is humble and straightforward, but its simplicity is precisely part of its power and meaning. It's a deeply significant moment of family unity, of gratitude expressed for the year that passed with all its blessings and lessons, and of shared hope for what will come. By savoring toshikoshi soba together, Japanese families gather around the table, share their personal reflections on the ending year, express their expectations and dreams for the future, and strengthen the bonds that unite them, all under the protective and benevolent shadow of this ancient tradition that connects past, present, and future generations. Toshikoshi soba, in its culinary essence, is quite a simple and straightforward dish, without excesses or unnecessary complications. But like so many manifestations of high Japanese cuisine, its true beauty and excellence lie not in the complexity of technique or elaboration of presentation, but in the impeccable quality of ingredients used and the subtle, balanced harmony of flavors that complement each other perfectly. The absolute and non-negotiable foundation of the dish is naturally the soba noodles themselves. The quality of soba can vary enormously, from mass-produced commercial versions that may contain up to 70% common wheat flour mixed with only 30% buckwheat flour, to premium artisanal soba, known as juwari soba or 10-part soba, made with 100% pure buckwheat flour. The latter is considered the highest standard, more difficult to prepare due to the lack of gluten that naturally binds common wheat, but offers a more intense flavor, more delicate texture, and all the nutritional benefits of buckwheat in its purest form. Soba is cooked quickly in boiling water, usually just 4 to 6 minutes for fresh noodles, or according to package instructions for dried, and then is immediately cooled in ice water to stop the cooking and maintain the desired al dente texture. This thermal shock process also helps remove excess starch from the surface, resulting in more distinct and less sticky strands. Next, the soba is served in a hot broth prepared with dashi, that fundamental and absolutely essential broth of Japanese cuisine that forms the flavorful base of countless dishes. Traditional dashi is made through careful infusion of kombu, a dried seaweed rich in glutamic acid, the source of umami, and katsuobushi, dried bonito flakes that have been fermented, smoked, and then shaved into paper-thin flakes. The process of making dashi is almost meditative in its simplicity. The kombu is gently heated in water until almost boiling, then removed, and then the katsuobushi flakes are added, left to steep for a few minutes, and strained. The result is an extraordinarily clear, aromatic, and deeply flavorful broth, light but intense, that comforts the soul and warms the body without weighing on the stomach. For toshikoshi soba broth, this dashi is seasoned with shoyu, soy sauce, and mirin, sweet rice wine, creating a perfect balance between salty, sweet, and umami. The accompaniments, or toppings, that adorn toshikoshi soba vary significantly from one family to another, from one region of Japan to another, reflecting personal tastes, local traditions, and often carrying their own specific symbolisms that add to the dish's overall meaning. Kamaboko, decorative slices of fish cake with a pink or red edge and white interior, symbolizes the rising sun over the horizon. The white represents snow and purity, while the pink or red represents the morning sun, joy, and celebration. Tempura, usually crispy fried shrimp, or vegetables like sweet potato or pumpkin, represents luck and prosperity. And the curved shape of shrimp tempura is seen as symbolizing a long life where one lives so long that their back begins to curve with advanced age. Negi, or finely sliced green onion, is practically ubiquitous and adds a touch of freshness and a slight sharpness that complements the rich broth. Some believe that negi symbolizes the desire to negate or forget the difficulties of the ending year, although this etymology is more folkloric than linguistically proven. Eggs can appear in various forms, as kinshi tamago, extremely thin omelet strips resembling golden threads, or as sliced boiled egg, or even as a raw egg cracked directly into the hot broth, creating the popular tsukimi soba, where the yolk resembles the full moon. Other common toppings include wakame, seaweed, sliced shiitake mushrooms, and naruto, another type of kamaboko with a characteristic spiral design. Toshikoshi soba has long transcended the category of mere cuisine or simple gastronomic tradition to firmly establish itself as a fundamental pillar of Japanese cultural identity. Its remarkable persistence through the centuries, surviving and even flourishing despite all the dramatic social, technological, and cultural changes that transformed Japan from an isolated feudal society into a modern, globalized powerhouse, is powerful testimony to its deep roots in the collective soul of the Japanese people. Even with accelerated globalization and widespread introduction of new Western traditions and customs, especially after World War II, year-crossing soba continues to be a sacred and inviolable moment for the vast majority of Japanese. Surveys show that more than 2/3 of the Japanese population still maintain this tradition, an impressive number in a society that has so completely embraced many aspects of modern Western culture. It's a point of spiritual quietude and deep reflection in an increasingly accelerated, noisy, and distracted world. Amid the frenetic bustle of modern life, with its constant demands for attention and productivity, this simple bowl of noodles gently invites us to pause, to breathe, to honor the past with gratitude, and to look to the future with renewed optimism and determination. For many Japanese, especially those of older generations, but also surprisingly for many young people, Toshikoshi soba evokes visceral and emotional memories of childhood, of magical New Year's Eves spent with family gathered, of the distant, melancholic sound of temple bells echoing through the cold winter air, and the luminous promise full of possibilities of a new beginning. It's a dish that nourishes not only the physical body with its carbohydrates, proteins, and nutrients, but also the soul with its symbolic charge, and the collective memory of a people with its uninterrupted continuity through generations. The Toshikoshi soba tradition offers us a gentle but profound reminder that regardless of the challenges, difficulties, losses, or disappointments of the ending year, there is always, invariably, the sacred opportunity for renewal, for personal transformation, for consciously cutting what no longer serves us, and for deliberately extending our life threads in search of more longevity, vibrant health, material fortune, and perhaps most importantly, authentic meaning and purpose. Toshikoshi soba is, in its deepest essence, a silent but eloquent toast. It's not made with cheerfully clinking crystal glasses or spectacularly popping champagne bottles, but with humble buckwheat noodle strands that simultaneously connect us to cyclical time, to the ancestors who came before us and kept this tradition alive, and to the eternally renewed and invincible hope that characterizes each new year, each new opportunity, each new beginning. It's a profound lesson, presented in the simplest and most accessible form possible, that true simplicity can carry the deepest and most transformative meanings, and that sometimes the most powerful rituals are those that can be performed by anyone, anywhere, with humble ingredients and an open heart. How about considering bringing a bit of this ancient Eastern wisdom to your own year-end celebration? Or, if it's not possible to reproduce the complete ritual, perhaps simply dedicate a moment to appreciate and reflect on the extraordinary cultural, philosophical, and spiritual richness that an apparently simple bowl of noodles can contain and transmit through generations. At Asian Food Stories, our passionate and committed mission is exactly this: to patiently and respectfully unravel the fascinating narratives, profound symbolisms, and cultural meanings that make food much more than just fuel for the body or passing pleasure for the palate, transforming it into a powerful and tangible link with the soul of a people, with its ancient history, and with its most fundamental values. If you genuinely enjoyed this gastronomic and cultural journey through time and Japanese tradition, don't forget to leave your like as a form of support. Share this video with friends and family who love history, culture, and good food, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of our upcoming fascinating stories about Asian food and the cultures that created it. Happy New Year, and may your next life threads be as long as soba, as healthy as resilient buckwheat, and absolutely full of flavor, meaning, and joy.